My name is Nia. I'm 36 years old, and that night was the night I walked out of the most expensive birthday party of my life in Las Vegas, and also the night I decided to cut ties completely with my adoptive family. We were in a private room at an upscale restaurant inside the Bellagio, a place designed to make people gasp in admiration. 60 guests, champagne bottles that cost more than my children's ages, and floral arrangements worth $10,000. It was my adoptive father's 75th birthday. It should have been a warm evening one where everyone felt respected and included. But it wasn't. I looked at my two children, Riley, 10, and Mason, 8, and saw them pushed off to a small side table in the corner of the room. In front of them were two empty plates. No cake, no meat, no explanation. I didn't understand what was happening until I heard my adoptive mother tell the chef, "There's no need to prepare children's meals for the side table." Then she stood up, raised her glass in front of everyone, and announced loudly and clearly, "The biological son and grandchildren eat first. Her children can wait for leftovers if they're lucky." Riley pressed her lips together, trembling. Mason just stared at his empty plate, as if he'd done something wrong. And in that moment, I understood. This was no longer a party. It was a deliberate lesson in humiliation, one they were trying to teach my children. After hearing those words, I didn't scream. I didn't grab the microphone or cause a scene. I simply stood there for a few seconds, staring straight at the side table where Riley and Mason were sitting. My children had nothing in front of them but two empty plates and glasses of water. What hurt me most wasn't their hunger, it was the look in their eyes. The look children get when they start to believe they don't deserve to be treated with kindness. Around me, scattered laughter rippled through the room. A few adults even pulled out their phones to record, as if this were some kind of entertainment. My adoptive mother raised her champagne glass, wearing an icy smile, as though she had just stated an obvious truth. My adoptive brother Brandon leaned back in his chair, smirked, and added, "They should have learned their place in this family a long time ago. Don't ruin Dad's birthday." That sentence sealed everything. They weren't just looking down on me, they wanted my children to remember it. I looked up at the crystal chandeliers, the tables overflowing with food, the designer clothes and glittering luxury all around me. Everything looked perfect. Except in one corner of the room, two children were being treated like they didn't belong. I felt something inside me snap clean and final, like a rope pulled tight for too long, finally breaking. I took a deep breath. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked over and lifted both Riley and Mason into my arms, one on each side. I passed the laughter, past the curious stares, past the place where they expected me to swallow it all like I always had. I walked straight out of the room, through the Bellagio lobby, past the slot machines chiming as if nothing at all had happened. And when the elevator doors closed, I knew it. Tonight was the night everything would change. I carried my children out of the banquet room and into the Bellagio lobby, where the noise of slot machines and drunken laughter hit us like a wall. Riley rested her head against my shoulder, and Mason was half asleep, exhausted from hunger and fatigue. I pressed the button for the private elevator to the top floor, the gold-trimmed walls, the soft jazz music, the kind of quiet you have to pay for. I pulled my suitcase out of the closet and opened the black leather briefcase I carried on every trip. Inside were all the documents I'd signed for that family ever since I was 22. Brandon's college trust fund, the paperwork guaranteeing the penthouse loan, the recurring wire transfers. I opened my laptop and glanced at the clock. 9:24 p.m. 22 minutes, that was how long my children sat staring at empty plates while 60 adults pretended not to notice. I whispered, like passing sentence. Then they have exactly 22 minutes left in my life, and I began to move. If you've ever been treated like an extra in your own family, comment one so I can keep writing the part where Nia strikes back in those 22 minutes. I sank onto the sofa in the suite, the suitcase already open in front of me, the black leather briefcase on the coffee table like evidence. I flipped open my laptop. The time in the corner clicked over to 9:24 p.m. I stared at it for a long moment. 22 minutes. And in those same 22 minutes, I finally woke up to the truth. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as funding. I started with my banking app. There were two 529 college savings accounts under my name as the owner, one for Colton and one for Brooklyn, Brandon's kids. They had never put a single dollar into them, while I'd poured money in from every bonus, every raise, every time I skipped a vacation so I could take on extra work. I hit, withdraw all, accepted every penalty. I didn't care anymore. Next, I logged into the penthouse loan portal, the place they bought purely to show off. They needed someone with spotless credit to co-sign, and I had done it. I downloaded the guarantor agreement, drafted a short letter. I am withdrawing my guarantee effective immediately, signed it electronically, and sent it straight through the bank's secure system. Finally, I opened the recurring transfer to Brandon, $4,200 a month, so he could keep his luxury apartment after the divorce. I hit cancel, confirm twice. Done. I closed the laptop. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt lighter, as if 22 years of being used had slid off my shoulders with a single click. The elevator doors opened on the restaurant floor. I stepped out, holding 2 plates of Wagyu ribeye, still sizzling in hot butter, fragrant with rosemary. It was the most expensive item on the menu, $160 a plate, and I'd told the kitchen to fire them immediately. I didn't ask permission. I didn't explain. I just looked the executive chef in the eye and said, 2 orders for my children. Right now. He didn't ask a single question. I carried the 2 plates straight back into the party like I was holding proof. The room, loud a second ago, fell dead silent. Knives and forks stopped. Champagne glasses froze midair. My adoptive mother saw me first. Her face tightened, and her voice dropped low, sharp as a blade. Put those down. Children don't eat $160 steak. Take it away. Now. Brandon let out a mocking laugh, leaning back in his chair like he'd just watched a great show. He spoke loudly enough for the entire room to hear. Real son and real grandkids eat first. Her kids can wait for leftovers. A few people actually laughed. Phones lifted again. I didn't look at them. I walked straight to the side table and set the 2 plates of steak down in front of Riley and Mason. The smell of meat rose up like a shield. Riley's eyes went wide. Mason stared, dazed, like he couldn't believe the food was real and sitting right in front of him. I pulled out a chair and sat between my children, my voice steady. Tell me, from the beginning, what happened earlier today? And I could feel it, every gaze in the room locked onto us. Good. Let them hear. Let them remember. And that little lesson? I said softly, without looking up. It's going to cost you more than you think. If you want me to keep writing the part where Nia delivers the final line and walks out of the party, comment 1. I stood up slowly, as if I were walking out of a courtroom. Not to lose, but to deliver a sentence. I looked around the room, at 60 adults eating and laughing while 2 children sat hungry. Champagne glasses still glittered, plates were still piled high, and in the middle of all that luxury was one bare truth. They believed they had the right to be cruel without paying for it. I turned to my adoptive mother. She sat perfectly upright, lips pressed tight, eyes cold as stone, like she'd just done the right thing to teach children what she called family. Brandon started to rise, irritation flashing across his face. That's enough, Nia. You're overreacting. I lifted a hand to stop him. No shouting, no drama. I spoke calmly, but every word landed like a hammer. Tonight, you just taught my children the most valuable lesson of their lives. Everybody episode. The entire room went so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. I glanced down at Riley and Mason, both of them trying to eat fast, as if someone might snatch the food away. I gently wiped Riley's mouth with a napkin, then continued, my voice still even. That lesson is this. Some places call themselves family, but they're really just places where people decide who deserves to eat and who has to wait for leftovers. My adoptive mother let out a harsh, bitter laugh. And what are you going to do? Threaten to leave? Tomorrow you'll come crawling back and apologize. Brandon smirked right along with her. Without us, who are you? I met their eyes. It didn't hurt anymore. There was only clarity. No, I'm not threatening. I'm informing you. I took Riley's hand, then Mason's. They looked up at me, eyes full of fear and trust. I led them between the long tables, past every face that had laughed, every person who had looked away. No one tried to stop us. No one said another word. When the banquet room door closed behind me, I didn't look back. I caught a faint snippet of my adoptive father's voice, low and dismissive. Let her go. She'll cool off. but this time I knew for certain I would never cool off the way they wanted me to again. The suite door clicked shut behind me, small, but final, as if the entire outside world had just been locked away. The casino noise, the clinking glasses, the fake laughter, all of it vanished the moment the lock caught. I leaned back against the door for a few seconds, feeling my heartbeat still racing, but no longer chaotic clear. I held Riley's hand on my left and Mason's on my right, guiding them into the second bedroom. Soft, golden light washed over their faces, and for the first time since we'd stepped into that party, I saw them exhale with relief. Riley kicked off her tiny high heels without me having to remind her. Mason yanked off his tie and let it drop onto the carpet like he'd just wriggled out of a trap. There was still a smear of butter from the steak on Riley's dress and a streak of mashed potatoes on Mason's shirt, but I didn't see them as dirty. I saw them as proof that they had eaten. I pulled the blankets up to their chins, careful and deliberate, the way I had when they were babies, and stood there watching, until their breathing evened out that deep, heavy sleep children fall into when they're full and feel completely safe. I stepped back into the living room and went straight to the wall, safe hidden inside the closet. I entered the code Riley's birthday, then Mason's. Inside was a small matte black USB drive holding something that family had never known existed, their entire report card. I picked it up, then set it back down, like a reminder to myself. Everything was already done. I didn't need anything else to prove my point. I returned to the bed, switched on Do Not Disturb, and began blocking phone numbers one by one. Dennis, Gloria, Brandon, the family group chat, each name, one after another. I wasn't crying anymore. I just felt light. And as I lay down between my children, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner and their steady breathing, I realized it. Tonight was the night the final chain broke. The first light of Las Vegas morning slipped through the gap in the blackout curtains, cutting a thin golden line across my face. I opened my eyes to Riley's hair, brushing my lips, and Mason's foot pressed into my side. For the first 3 seconds, I didn't remember where I was. Then last night came rushing back, and this time, I smiled. My phone, face down on the nightstand, was vibrating so hard it almost rattled itself onto the floor. I flipped it over. The number on the screen made me let out a soft laugh. 97 missed calls, 43 new messages, all from the same 4 numbers I had blocked the night before. I put it back on silent and didn't open a single one. At exactly 8 a.m., room service arrived. Mickey-shaped pancakes, extra bacon, and chocolate milk in glass bottles. Riley and Mason sat cross-legged on the floor in their pajamas, watching cartoons as if the concept of a side table had never existed. I sipped my coffee and watched the city wake up beneath us. At 8:17, the first domino fell. An email from Colton and Brooklyn's private school popped up, the subject line screaming in red. Urgent. Outstanding balance. Ennis. They demanded full payment within 10 days, or the children would be immediately withdrawn from the school. I scrolled down once. Then I hit delete. At 8:34, an unfamiliar Nevada number called. I put it on speaker while spreading butter on Riley's pancakes. The man introduced himself as a senior loan manager and informed me that the guarantee had been withdrawn. My adoptive father now had 90 days to find a replacement guarantor or pay down the loan, or the bank would begin foreclosure proceedings. At 8:49, the suite's landline rang. The front desk apologized and said a man named Brandon was causing a disturbance at the private elevator and refusing to leave. I replied calmly, "Yes, please call the police. Thank you." And I sat there, perfectly composed, watching my children eat breakfast like ordinary kids, while that entire family began to crack apart piece by piece. By 9:27 a.m., a number I hadn't blocked appeared on my screen. I was about to let it ring out, but something made me answer. "Nia, it's Aunt Cheryl." Her voice was small, hoarse, like she'd been crying. Aunt Cheryl was the only person in that family who had ever treated me like a human being, the one who used to slip me $100 for gas when my adoptive mother wasn't looking, the one who never missed a single happy birthday text. She spoke slowly. "I saw the video. At least 3 people posted it online. You can clearly hear Gloria saying what she said to the kids. I can't believe it." I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was afraid that if I spoke, I would start to cry. And I didn't want to cry anymore. Aunt Cheryl let out a long sigh. I was going to stay quiet like I always do. But not this time. I just transferred you $20,000. It was the last money I'd been saving for Gloria's 60th birthday cruise. I jumped up from my chair. Aunt, you don't have to. No. She cut me off, her voice firm and unwavering. I do have to. Because I refuse to let my money keep feeding cruelty. I've blocked her number. I've blocked Brandon too. I'm done. She paused for a few seconds, then said one last thing soft, but heavy with meaning. You're not wrong. You were just patient for far too long with people who didn't deserve it. The call ended before I could even say thank you. I stood by the window, watching the desert sunlight flood the room in gold. For the first time in a very long while, I felt it. I wasn't alone anymore. 10 months after that 75th birthday in Las Vegas, everything had finally gone quiet, but not the kind of quiet that comes from me, swallowing my pride and going back. It was the kind of quiet that comes when a door has closed for good. My adoptive parents lost the Waldorf penthouse in early spring. The bank foreclosed and auctioned it off for nearly $2 million less than the price they used to boast about. They sold the house in Shaker Heights to cover the gap, but it still wasn't enough. On the day the moving trucks arrived, the neighbors stood behind their curtains, pretending not to look, the same way they once pretended not to see my children go hungry. Brandon spiraled. He missed the tuition deadline one final time, and the private school expelled Colton and Brooklyn that very week. The landlord changed the locks on his loft, and just 2 months later, the court granted temporary custody to his ex-wife, because Brandon couldn't prove he had stable housing. He disappeared from every group chat, from every call, as if his entire life had only existed by leaning on me. As for me, I moved to North Carolina and filed paperwork to change all 3 of our last names. Riley became Riley Grace Carter, Mason became Mason James Carter, and I took back the name my biological mother had given me. The judge signed everything in a single afternoon so effortlessly, as if he understood that some names aren't meant to be kept, but escaped. I accepted a senior management position at a fintech company in Charlotte. The signing bonus alone was enough to make up for everything that had ever been taken from me. I bought a 4-bedroom house, put down 20%. No cosigner, no favors owed. On the day my adoptive father turned 76, they celebrated at a modest steakhouse with just a handful of people. Meanwhile, in my new kitchen, the scent of vanilla cake and buttercream filled the air. Riley wore a sparkling crown, and Mason scattered sprinkles with the seriousness of a mission. She looked up at me and asked, "Mom, I'll never have to sit in front of an empty plate again, right?" I pulled her into my arms and said, "Never again."